consultation specialist with S&C Lavalin. Today we are continuing our series of live stream topics on the Northern Road Link project as it moves through the provincial environmental assessment and federal impact assessment processes. The topics we are covering parallel our project activities, so we hope these will help our viewers and listeners better understand the project and provide input along the way. So let's get started. Today, as part of our continued efforts to be transparent with project information and feedback, we will be doing a review of the feedback received on the Northern Road Link project to date. Why don't we get things started? We'll start things off as we normally do, giving people a bit of an introduction or background on the project, just to get everyone up to the same level in terms of information. And the Northern Road Link project is a proposed all-season road in northwestern Ontario on Treaty 9 lands. The idea is that it would connect Ring of Fire mineral deposits to the all-season highway network via the Martin Falls Community Access Road, and at the same time would provide an opportunity for Webequie First Nation via its Webequie Supply Road to connect to the all-season highway network. This project is subject to both the Environmental Assessment Act and the Federal Impact Assessment Act. The project proponents or sponsors are Martin Falls First Nation and Webequie First Nation. Both communities are remote Indigenous communities located about 500 kilometers north of Thunder Bay, and as I mentioned, they are remote, meaning they are only accessible by winter road. They have no all-season roads. There have been previous studies done in the region looking at all-season roads, and finally in 2020, Ontario, Martin Falls, and Webequie announced an agreement to work together to conduct an environmental assessment for the project funded by the province. In terms of the project's interaction with the other road projects, just so people don't get confused, we have the Webequie Supply Road to the north, which runs from Webequie First Nation Airport to the McFalls Lake area and the Ring of Fire area. Then that would then connect, the plan is that that would then connect to the Northern Road Link, which would run south to the Martin Falls area, and then where it would then connect with the Martin Falls Community Access Road, which would then ultimately connect with the provincial highway system. And the purpose of this road is to enable economic activity by facilitating transport of goods and services and resources. And as I always say, it's more than just a road. There are other components to it, but the road itself would be an all-season, again, multi-use gravel road. It would range between 117 and 164 kilometers, depending on which corridor alternatives are chosen. Right now, there's a number of different segment alternatives. So once these are finalized, the road could be anywhere between 117 and 164 kilometers long. The right-of-way is expected to be 100 meters with a cleared area of 60 meters. There would be numerous water crossings, most by using culverts as structures. There would be one large bridge crossing of the Attawapiskat River, which would be greater than 200 meters. In terms of ancillary infrastructure or additional infrastructure that's associated with the road to support the road itself, its construction and operation, there would be both temporary and permanent facilities. Temporary facilities would include storage and laydown areas. Permanent facilities would include maintenance facilities and yards. Access roads would be both temporary and permanent, depending on what they're for. Some gravel pits and quarries might be temporary, so the access roads to get to those might then be temporary. And then, of course, these access roads also have would also have water crossings in certain in certain cases. That could be bridges or culverts. Then you would have the aggregate or pits and quarries from which you would get the construction material to build the road with and maintain the road. And then finally, construction camps, which would be located at different locations along the route to maximize efficiency of road construction. These would be temporary. So let's dive in and talk about some of the comments that were received. I've grouped them by different themes. Um, let's talk a little bit about the mining industry comments. One of the comments was the relationship between the Northern Road Link environmental assessment and the regional assessment for the Ring of Fire that's currently going on, being led by the federal government through the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. And then to help facilitate future mine activities, there were some suggestions from the mining industry to ensure that the road avoids known areas of known mine development or high priority exploration areas. Um, make sure that the road services mineral exploration and future development, and then making sure the road ends at the airstrip for logistical purposes. And other mining industry comments relate to the timing and phasing of road construction, including an expedited project schedule to facilitate road and resource development, sort of advance resource development, so that more opportunities can be provided faster to um, youth in communities as well. A provision of a detailed construction plan to allow for resource development to move ahead more confidently, some sort of a firm plan that would provide mining companies with the confidence to invest in the area. Different road development methods need to be considered to help speed up the schedule, the construction schedule. That was one of their recommendations or suggestions. Making sure that the cumulative effects assessment for the environmental assessment includes um, the mining industry as reasonably what the mining industry considers as reasonably foreseeable projects. The need for a rough estimate of road construction and operation workforce requirements in the proposed terms of reference, as well as a skills inventory for community members to help maximize their participation in maximize participation by Webequie and Martin Falls and community members from neighboring communities, and then road construction techniques, use of wetland road building, and the need for making sure that the road complies with MTO requirements or guidelines. Um, let's move now to the Indigenous community comments, and these are wide ranging, starting with greater involvement in the project, more involvement through future project milestones, nation to nation format discussions, project discussions with Martin Falls and Webequie First Nation were recommended by some Indigenous communities. Um, more input by Indigenous communities that are not project proponents or sponsors. So input from First Nations other than Webequie and Martin Falls as to the advantages and disadvantages of alternative methods. And that's a bit of a theme that we'll see going through these comments. There were some comments from communities asking for more of a voice in this project that's being led by Martin Falls and Webequie First Nation, to the point of providing input on water body crossing, structure types, span lengths, road alignment, and aggregate extraction as well. And then another comment was a disaggregated approach to reporting the results of input from Indigenous nations. So not grouping together all the comments and lumping them together, but showing them individually, which is what we've done historically through this project. And then moving on to Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests. Um, the comment was one of the comments was that the terms of reference and consultation and engagement plan should be written to meet the toughest requirements between the Ontario and the federal environmental or impact assessment processes, which it is. It has to meet both sets of regulations. And then continuing on with Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests, one of the comments was that Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous land and resource use are components of rights and interests of First Nations, but don't represent all of the rights that are present in the project area, saying that these rights extend beyond harvesting and omit cultural rights and other rights of importance. And then they moved into discussion, comments moved into discussion of preliminary valued components associated with Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests, um, and recommended the inclusion of indicators or ways of measuring impacts associated with Indigenous use of land and resources, such as availability of and fragmentation of land for rights-based activities and other interests, and the another suggested indicator was the perception of availability of land for rights-based activities. And then continuing with the Aboriginal and treaty rights and interests, there were a lot of comments, as you can tell. There were suggestion that another indicator for cultural continuity and well-being valued component be cultural landscapes and safe access to travel routes for practicing rights. And another one was using for a proposed new valued component of governance. The indicator could be changes to Indigenous authority and jurisdiction through the imposition of colonial regulatory processes. So looking at impacts on governance and self-determination. There were comments on COVID accommodation, um, showing, asking for flexibility of approaches and timelines in relation to what was the current pandemic. Um, Another interesting comment was weaving Indigenous knowledge into the environmental assessment, which it has now been mandated by the regulatory authorities to do that. Um, no longer will Indigenous knowledge be stuffed away in its own little section of a document. It has to be demonstrated and included in all aspects of the environmental assessment or impact assessment as well. Um, let's see. Another comment here was input by First Nations other than proponents into the baseline conditions, mitigation measures, residual effects, follow-up strategies for each valued component. So again, going back to more communities other than just the proponents getting involved in the project in at a technical level. There were other comments on odor, stating that odor must be considered and assessed as part of the air quality assessment for construction phases, um, as diesel-powered construction vehicles have the potential to alter the environment through introduction of odor to an otherwise neutral environment, increasing avoidance behaviors and negative perceptions of harvesters and land users. Climate change was a big topic that was raised. The comment being climate change assessment must also consider Indigenous perspectives and Indigenous knowledge to make sure that holistic or all-encompassing view is taken and applied. And then when it comes to commitments and monitoring, making sure commitments and monitoring related to potential impacts to Indigenous rights and interests are developed as well, included in the conceptual monitoring plan, and also assessed for their effectiveness. Other Indigenous community comments include noise, participation by First Nations other than the proponents in selecting noise receptor locations, um, for Indigenous harvesters and land users that's representative of conditions necessary for the quiet enjoyment of the land. Um, with regard to fish, wildlife, and vegetation existing species lists, making sure that the list of potential fish, wildlife, and vegetation species present in the regional study area must be confirmed with First Nations, uh, other First Nations in that larger region, other than just the proponent communities. The health assessment, there's a suggestion that the health assessment should model a self-sufficient Indigenous receptor in relation to country food harvest and address potential future safety concerns of additional harvesters. And then for any food tissue sampling programs, the recommendation was, or the suggestion was, that organ meat of species must also be sampled because it's an important part of community members' diet typically. So now we're going to move on to, as we get ready to wrap things up, we're going to move on to what's going on right now in the environmental assessment process. Right now, we've got baseline data collection and identification and evaluation of alternatives underway. We're collecting input to the alternatives, routing and ancillary infrastructure, aggregate and rock sources. We're getting feedback on this as well through our consultation efforts, which will continue, of course, through the fall. Um, we're getting other input on criteria and indicators, as well as baseline information and Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous land and resource use to help establish these key um, area features and resources valuable to communities. We need to know about these so we can avoid them and mitigate any impacts that might occur. Looking ahead a little bit after round one, future project milestones after round one would include evaluation of alternatives, selection of preferred methods, preliminary effects assessment, and cumulative effects assessment, as well as a review of the draft environmental assessment report, and then a review and submission of the final environmental assessment report. So lots of things, activities coming up in the future. And again, and going back to consultation and engagement, it takes many forms. It takes the form of Indigenous community meetings. We look forward to visiting your community. Open houses, these will occur in the fall in Geraldton and in Thunder Bay as well. Public open houses and virtual community meetings as well. There will be continued live streams and radio shows like what you're hearing now. This is a live stream on topics that sort of parallel what we're doing right now in the environmental assessment process, as well as technical comments that are topics that are of interest to community members, such as construction in wetland areas and species at risk studies. In terms of where we are in the federal impact assessment process, just to get everyone up to speed, the initial project description has been completed, as has the detailed project description. Um, we have determined officially from the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada on May 23rd that an impact assessment is in fact required, and we will be receiving final tailored impact statement guidelines, which are essentially the work plan for what we're supposed to do as part of the impact assessment. We'll be receiving these in final form by August 20th of this year, coming up very soon. And that wraps up everything. If we can move to the final slide to talk about how you can contact us. And you can contact us by the numbers on your and email addresses on your screen. You can get us through your website as well too. We would love to visit your community and talk more about this project. So please get in touch with us if you are interested in having us visit your community and talk with you and get to know you and collect your feedback. So we look forward to doing that as soon as possible. And that wraps up today's overview. of the project feedback. We hope this was helpful, and we hope it encourages you to join us again soon. Don't forget to keep in touch with our project team members via the contact information available on our website, northernroadlink.ca, miigwech, and make sure to look out for project updates on social media and our website. Miigwech, see you soon.